If you've been wondering about the best path to becoming an AI engineer or machine learning architect, then you're in for a treat. In today's episode, I sit down with Rola, a machine learning architect with extensive experience in the tech industry. Rola is not only an AI expert, but she's also an AWS community ambassador and holds an incredible 12 AWS certification. Talk about expertise. She's here to share her inspiring journey into the competitive world of AI, offering valuable insights from her transition out of academia to her current role as a leader in the field. Trust me, there's so much you can learn from this story. Here's a sneak peek of what we're going to cover in this episode: the challenges and guilt she faced when she left academia for the tech industry, the cloud services she relies on as a machine learning engineer, some fascinating projects she's worked on, many of which you can replicate to build your own portfolio, and also her advice for breaking into the highly competitive AI space. Make sure you listen all the way through as Rola shares some absolute gems, and I'm sure you won't want to miss those. So make sure you're in a comfortable position so you can take in all the advice she has to give. All right, let's get into this conversation. Hello, Rola. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you, Naomi?
Yeah, I'm doing really good, thanks. I'm really glad we could get you on because you have a wealth of experience in the AI machine learning space as well as the cloud space. Could you start by just letting us know a bit about what your current job title is at the moment and what that entails day to day?
So I'm a machine learning architect at RapidScale, a US company. So I serve the US market. And what I do day to day is to help clients clarify their data, AI, and ML needs. From there, I architect a system that fulfills that need, and then I build it on the ground. So I'm an end to end ML consultant, if you will.
Yeah, I know AI and ML is a hot topic that everyone wants to get into these days. So I'm sure you're going to shed some good light on the best ways to do that. But before we proceed, I want us to go back in time. I was doing a bit of research on you and your background before this interview, and I could see, you spent a lot of time in academia. You did some PhD work. Can you talk us through, like, what you studied for your PhD, why you chose that?
Yeah, so before tech, I was an academic. I did a PhD at McGill University in neuroscience and bioinformatics. I studied how chromatin architecture is how the genome folds inside the cell. It's actually a pretty cool problem. We can go into it a little bit more detail if you will, but I'll keep it brief. But um, I started in, I've always known that I wanted to be a scientist. When I was a kid, I really wanted to do research. And I did an undergrad in biochemistry, did a PhD in neuroscience, and studied genomics. And then I moved into industry a few years ago. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, so because you studied sort of I'm not that smart. So let's say, what was it? Bioengineering,
So I started in biochemistry,
biochemistry.
which is the study of how molecules um, in the cell kind of enable day to day life, right? Biochemistry is the chemistry of life.
Mm,
That was a little bit too detailed for me. It was a lot of amino acid X in protein Y interacts with amino acid Z in protein A to create this. So it was just too intense, and so I moved into molecular biology and then into genomics.
no, that's great. And after you did your PhD, can you talk us through, like, sort of your first role, like in industry? Because I know sometimes people in academia, they just keep doing the next PhD. You can always go deeper and deeper. So what was that first job you got after your PhD, and how did that sort of set you up for the future?
So you're right in that transitioning from academia is not easy. It's usually a really big hurdle for many people, and it was for me. I think I pondered leaving academia for a good year or two before I actually took the step. There's a lot of associated guilt. There's a lot of associated guilt because you feel like, on one hand, academics feel like they're doing good for the world, you do it. You're not chasing money, you're chasing the good for humanity. And then the other side of the guilt is, well, you my parents would always say, well, you tanked about a good 15 years into this path. Like, how are you going to now move? So it is difficult. But there were a few reasons why I left. And for me, the first job was at a local Montreal startup called Local Logic. Um, it was it is a location intelligence company. So I wanted a startup out of academia because I felt startups are closest to academia. There's still a lot of freedom of thinking. You wear multiple hats. There's a lot of just agency in what you can do as compared to an enterprise, for example. So I started there. I think I was extremely lucky with Local Logic. I'm super thankful for them for taking me in and taking a chance on me, because a lot of academics get out of academia, they end up in a bad company, they think that's what industry is about, and they go back. And I know a lot of examples of this, and I think I was extremely lucky in that one, Local Logic gave me a chance. They were willing to take this academic who had never stepped into industry and say, okay, we're going to bet on you to succeed. And I'm super thankful for that. But also, they're genuinely good people. Like, they were genuinely good people trying to change the world in positive ways. They weren't, it changed my view of what the industry is. Not everybody in industry is greedy and maximizing profit and all of these negative things we hear in academia. I think Local Logic kind of set me on the right foot. If I had started in another company, I might have been back in academia today.
Yeah, I mean, this is so fascinating because I think this is the first time I've ever heard the concept around sort of guilt around leaving
Oh, yeah.
academia. Like, I know a lot of times people who sort of go down that academia route, they find it difficult to transition, but I think it's really interesting to hear you express that because I'm sure a lot of people must be feeling that way. And even your second point around, taking the plunge out of academia. And if you happen to work for a company that wasn't right for you for whatever reason, it's always, that could be quite traumatic in terms of like, oh, no, this is how it all is. Let me go back to
It's
academia.
evil. It's evil out there. Let's go back and hide. Yeah, and there's a level of, like, you feel there's treason, like you're betraying this system. It's interesting.
That's so fascinating. But yeah, once you got into this first company, wait, was your role sort of related to what you'd been studying, so molecular biology, or did your role change?
No, no, no. It was very different. It was in real estate. So it was geospatial data.
Completely
It was
different.
I had never thought I would ever work for a real estate company or anything like that, because it was very different. Again, to the it was Local Logic. The people were so genuine and so amazing that I'm like, okay, I could do this with these people. I think the one thing I've always done in my career is to bet more on people than other information, and they were just very good people, and I took the plunge. It was so. It was. I did a. I was hired as a back end developer. I was building data systems in the back end. It was similar in that it was data. The one thing that is consistent across my career since I was 16 years old is data. I've always played with data, and it was always central to what I've done. So I started at 16 entering data for legal systems in Lebanon, and it just went from there. But the only the only similarity between what I had studied and the job at Local Logic was data. How do
I
you?
think
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is one of the most fascinating things about the tech industry as a whole, is because there's so much transferable skills. So I'm sure, as part of your PhD and your research, you were, manipulating data in all sorts of interesting ways, where you could still take those same skills and apply them to like a completely different industry. And I just find that so fascinating.
yeah. I tell people that computation for me, or tech, is a tool. It's not. I didn't study tech for pure tech. I don't optimize computational systems for no good reason. I use it to get to an objective, whether that's studying the human genome or studying real estate in Montreal or other systems. It's a tool.
And I want to like double click on that because this is a valuable thing, and I really want the listeners to pay attention because a lot of the time people come to me, they're like, oh yeah, I've learned Python, what project should I do? And I'm like, look around, like what what's a need you have that you could use, like what could you use it for? And I think, yeah, a lot of the times when it comes to tech, I think the conversation is very narrow in terms of learn how to program, learn how to do cloud, but I think we all forget that the technology is always in service of something else, like you're optimizing something or you're analyzing something. And so those are the actual skills that need to be developed as well. Feeling frustrated about your lack of cloud job offers? Well, you're not alone. For many, breaking into the cloud industry feels overwhelming, especially when you don't know what to focus on. Without the right projects and a resume that grabs attention, it can feel like an impossible climb, but it doesn't have to be this way. Our program at cloudcareermentor.com is here to help you cut through the noise and get results. You master in-demand skills like Linux, AWS, Git, Terraform, CI/CD, and much more, all the while building real-world projects that show recruiters what you're capable of. We'll teach you how to turn those projects into standout resumes, and we'll also give you the tools on how to interview to impress hiring managers. This guidance is personalized and tailored to you. Plus, with personalized mentorship, a structured learning plan, and an engaged communities, you'll have everything you need to achieve your goals and learn the right skills. Your dream job isn't out of reach. Just visit cloudcareermentor.com to start building the skills employers are looking for today. Check it out now.
Yeah, solve a problem. You need to solve a problem, and whatever tool allows you to, then that's the tool that you have to pull out of your toolkit.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And so yeah, I think the transferable skills as well as the using the technology are very, very important. So I see you were at that company for a while, and then at some point you became basically like a full-fledged software developer. Could you talk us through what that transition was like?
That was a bit difficult for me. Again, I think when you're a PhD student and developing for your own project, again, you're optimizing the end goal. You're not really looking at efficiency of that software. You're not really spending time optimizing compute and memory and time and all sorts of things. Because what you want is the result, the data. What is the data telling me? And if it runs one extra night overnight, I mean, that's not a huge deal. When you get into industry and you're running production systems that are running huge amounts of data at very specific SLAs in terms of latency, then every mistake and every decision kind of grows, right? It's exaggerated. And so to learn that um, I have to sit down and really look at all of the elements of the system and what it means for all of the edge use cases was very different from what I had done before.
Yeah, it's when sort of research meets the real world where there's like deadlines and budgets and all sorts. It's yeah, it's a completely different world. And some people find it stressful, some people find it exhilarating, some people find it, in between. So yeah, I'm sure like, stepping up in that way and, learning about optimizations and testing, like you're saying. I'm sure there's loads of software engineers who aren't really good at testing yet. So no, that's really, really interesting to learn. So I'm curious to know. Okay, so you go from back end engineer, then you become a senior software developer. What was that transition? Was there a transition into sort of full blown data science? Like what was that like?
So the data science part was a natural progression. So when I did my PhD, I was doing it in a lab that is part of the deep learning community, the AI system in Montreal. And so we were studying machine learning regularly in weekly sessions, and we had ML projects and so on. So it was part of the PhD lab that I did my work in. And so it was a natural transition between the lab I was in, the data, the tech. It was, for me, it was a natural transition because again, I think of these things as tooling. right? They are tools for me to answer a question. And I think of all of the things that I know as tools. I don't want to label myself as a single thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think, this podcast is called Cloud Career Mentor. So I'm curious to know about your sort of experience with the cloud. I think you've mostly used AWS, I'm guessing, but correct me if I'm wrong. Can you walk me through sort of some of what's AWS services you use and how you use them, just to give people an idea of what like maybe a data scientist or a machine learning professional uses on a day-to-day basis?
So yeah, I love AWS. I work on AWS every day. I am certified on the other two clouds, Azure and GCP, but I still predominantly work on AWS. Um, I use a lot of services. So I use SageMaker, of course, for models that we build from scratch and custom systems that we build. I use a lot of AWS's managed AI services. So these are pre-trained models like text-tracked recognition, Poly, a lot of those systems that are ready to go um, for customers that don't want to build their own. And of course, there's a lot of supporting systems, right? S3 and Dynamo and Lambdas. And we try to build event-driven serverless systems for most parts. So the whole serverless suite, we definitely use a lot.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually, now that you mentioned that, would it be possible to maybe let us know a little bit about like a an interesting project you've done? Obviously, you don't have to say like specifically what company or what it is, but I think it would be good for people to understand like maybe a scenario and how you pull the different services together to make that happen.
So we see a lot of need for intelligent document design. The reason is as companies are going from a paper based system to becoming more digitized, right? Everybody wants to be more digital after COVID. There's a lot of documents out there that are in printed form or that need to now be digitized. And so I've been working on systems that digitize documents intelligently. And to do that, we, of course, get these systems, get these PDFs, scanned PDFs through a lot of different means. And then what we do is we use TextTrack to read them. TextTrack is AWS's OCR tool, so it reads images in a sense, and it pulls the text out of them. And then what happens is we take that into a post processing system where we validate whether that text is reasonable, what the confidence level of TextTract is. The really good thing about most ML models is that they give you a confidence level. So it says, well, I'm 90% confident that I know what this is, or I'm 10% confident. So we added a human validation loop. So we look at those confidence levels and we say, well, if the system is not confident, now we're going to loop this into a human validation system. And in it on AWS, that's called A2I. I think it's called Amazon Augmented AI. And so what that allows you to do is it allows you to enter it through the system. It pings a human being, and through a UI, they can see what the system thinks things are, what the actual image is, and they can correct it. And then once they submit it, it goes through and it pulls all the metadata and everything we need, and we
Wow,
for it.
that is seriously impressive, and I think that sort of highlights to me the difference between doing something as a proof of concept and doing something for real in the real world. So if you'd asked me how to do that, like I'd have gone for the proof of concept approach where, okay, you upload your photo to S3 and then that triggers a Lambda function, which then maybe calls text track, which reads it. And yep, that's good enough. But then as as we can hear, like how you as a professional do it, not only do you sort of do that, but you also like get validation, you have all these additional testing, and there's all these other things that go on in the back end, which is really impressive to hear about. And because I think a lot of people don't really know what goes on in sort of machine learning roles or how technical it is, because I'm sure you described that really eloquently, and I'm sure it sounds really straightforward, but I'm sure there was a lot of challenge in the actual engineering of it. Like, how do you manipulate the text or the images, and how do you validate, and even thinking through how that entire system would work. Like, I'm sure it must have taken a lot of effort and thought.
It does, and you have to go in and would it work if the image is upside down? Would it work if it was tilted? Would it work at whatever if it was scanned black? All of these different scenarios, and that's the thing. If you're building a POC or a proof of concept for your own understanding, that's okay. But once you have to think, okay, well, this system is going to see 10 million images a day with an SLA of 2 days end to end. What does that mean? What happens if one of them falls through? If one of those 10 million disappears, what do I tell my client? So what happens in those error states, and how do I monitor what's happening across my whole system, and report to the right people so that our clients are happy?
Yeah, and I think this is a really important conversation because, a lot of people are interested in the AI space and, ChatGPT and all of that. And I remember at the start of AI, I don't see this as much anymore, but you'd see things like, oh, you can earn $500,000 to become a prompt engineer or something. And so a lot of people, especially people who weren't technical, maybe they're just beginners, they felt like, oh, I can get into AI. It's really easy and I could become an AI engineer. And, what I've always thought was when a company is looking for an AI engineer, they're probably looking for someone like yourself who has like a PhD, who understands like statistical analysis and all of that. And there's like who's also skilled like programmatically, versus someone who just did like a chat GPT course and now expects to be paid $500. Am I wrong? Like, I'd love to know your
No, no,
perspective on
you're
it.
not. I think it's a common problem with marketing and hypes. I think because we live in a social media world and everybody is optimizing for clicks, we are seeing very wild claims about a lot of things, even with Gen AI and what it will do. And I read things and I'm like that. If anybody knew what they were talking about, nobody would post that or read that or But the fact that we're optimizing for clicks is I think producing a lot of misinformation or exaggerated claims. And I think what you're saying is true in that will you get $500,000 for being a prompt engineer? I think at some point we've heard those, right? No, they're not true. Most companies are looking, at least companies that know what they're doing, right? I felt there was a fear of missing out, a FOMO effect, where people were hiring AI engineers at really large salaries just to say we have one. Um, but I think that doesn't last. That's short term. Most companies are looking for somebody who has a good technical background and some decent understanding of data and fundamental machine learning.
Now, you're probably excited about getting into tech, but you might be feeling confused about what your next step should be. What technology should you learn? How should you prepare for interviews? This is why I created a free guide called The 3 Simple Steps to Your First Cloud Job. If you want to break into the cloud industry as quickly as possible and are tired of getting rejections from recruiters, then this free guide will show you exactly what you need to do to secure that cloud job. Have you downloaded it yet? Link is in the description below. Yeah, and I think like with anything technology, I think always learning the fundamentals is always a good way to go. Learning how to program will always serve you well. I think, yeah, because I remember ages ago before sort of AI became big, I took a course on sort of machine learning. And it was cool because I could program, so I was like, okay, I can do some data analysis, some machine learning stuff, and it was really interesting. I learned all about pandas, I learned about regression models, and all of this. And at the end of it, I thought to myself, yeah, technically I can do this work, but I can't analyze. Like, I can't tell if what the machine learning model is spitting out, if it's good or if it's not. And that's when I really realized that actually it's not just about can you do the technical thing, it's also about how can you interpret it, how can you know that what you're doing is correct, which comes from, I'm assuming, years of education and understanding, like all the things you had to understand in your research life, because you could like analyze the data, you could do all the statistical significance and all that good stuff that's beyond just the technical bits.
Yeah, I agree. And I think anybody could take an example online and run through it, right? I think what the mark is of a good person who knows what they're doing is when it goes wrong, do you know where to look, right?
Mm,
When it goes wrong, when it fails, and machine learning is really extensive. Like we talk about the machine learning lifecycle when I talk to clients, we talk about 5 phases, right? We talk about the business needs. Tech always serves the business. So there's the business conversation. What does the client want to do? And what does that mean mathematically? And so we do this thing we call transpose the, we transfer the business problem into mathematical terms. Like, what does it mean in terms of math, right? So that's the first thing. Then there's the data phase. So you have to get the data, understand how to deal with the data, what's wrong with the data, if any, how do you put it in a way that's useful. Then there's the model phase, right? The machine learning part. What is the model I need? How do I optimize it? What are the metrics? Is it doing well? Then you have to put it in production. You created it, right? Now you have to serve it. And so then there's the dev phase of actually building and deploying and having this available to users. And then there's the ops phase where you're monitoring and maintaining, right? So it's a 5 phase system. And so when that goes wrong, you need to know where to look. And each of those, of course, have their own subfields, right?
yeah, that's yep, that's what I thought. I have this theory that like if a job pays really well, you're probably not going to be able to get that job in 6 weeks from
Yeah.
no experience. Like I feel like there's always a level. So the cloud industry, a couple of years ago, the cloud industry was really hot as the field to be in, and people think, oh, 6 weeks I can go from no experience to the cloud. And I think when people actually start getting into it, they realize that, oh wow, this is really difficult. I have to learn Linux, I have to learn what's the CI/CD stuff, what's like AWS, what. And I think sometimes people get disheartened. But what I try to say to people is that, look, it's hard, and that's why you get paid as much, because like if it was easy, then it wouldn't pay, it just wouldn't pay as much. So it's like, embrace the hard. Like, don't. And I'm saying this because I don't want people to be discouraged. I don't want people to think like, oh, maybe I can never get into AI, or I can never get into the cloud. I just want people to sort of appreciate the reality of it, and so they can actually have the right expectations and put in the work they need to get to that goal. And that's kind of what this conversation is all about, where it's like, okay, this is maybe one path of what you can do, so you can start planning appropriately if you want to go down that path, if you want to go down a different path. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to say I agree with you. I would say that my own belief is that anybody can do anything. Anybody can do anything with enough time and enough hard work. Like you have to put in the hard work and you have to put in the time, but you're fully capable. And I see what you're saying in that people kind of want a shortcut success in a sense, 6 weeks. No, I think when I got into the cloud, I studied almost 2 years, roughly 4 nights, let's say 4 or 5 nights uh, after my kids sleep for years, because the cloud is very vast. There, you're looking at all of these new concepts in a sense that are not found, and there's no university degree that prepares you for architecting or the cloud, and so you kind of pick it up on your own. So it's not easy, and I think that's my frustration with living online is that people see that one success post, but they don't know the iceberg that's underneath. They don't know that I've been studying for 2 years or that I put an average 5 6 hours a week in constant knowledge update.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm really grateful you share that, because that's what I tell people as well. I remember I mentor this guy, and he had no technical experience, and after 6 months he started getting interviews, and he got to the third stage of a cloud interview, and he didn't get it, and he was really frustrated, and I was like, in 6 months you're getting interviews. That's amazing. Like, but it's just, when you have that mismatch of expectations, and it makes it really difficult. But what actions or attributes do you think has helped you be successful in your career? Like, what attributes or actions do you have or did you take?
So I think the biggest thing again is this idea of hard work, consistency, and discipline. Like if you want something, you're fully capable of getting it if you do the hard work. So commit, show up, and don't give up. So that I think is the main thing that I believe in across all fields, regardless of what you're trying to do. That I think holds true. The other thing I think that helped me personally is being a people person. I think I genuinely am interested in people. I and I feel like being able to connect to people and be humble and authentic and just down to earth has helped a lot of people take a bet on me. There's a lot of places where I think I was luckier. It wasn't my own um, work, if I want to say, because people took a chance on me, and I think that helps.
Yep, and I agree. And this is another thing we say on the podcast as well, where, like getting into tech isn't always just about the tech.
No,
It's like it's
no,
about your personality, it's about your communication skills. Like I've given examples before where like I've had interviews where, I got the job and they were like, you're not the most technical person, but you fit in well with the team. And I got the job and I did well in those roles. And it's kind of like, yeah, if you show up to an interview, smile, ask questions,
yeah,
be positive and all of those things, be personable. Because at the end of the day, people want to work with people they like. And so you have to let your personality shine a little bit.
absolutely. And when we interview, we don't always take the person with the highest tech because you learn that, right? Tech is moving all the time, and so you're going to learn with time. But we focus a lot on the who you are as a person. Do you take criticism well? Can you learn? Are you good in how you interact with others? I think so. Don't underestimate the interpersonal skills.
Thank you so much. I think you've shared such valuable insight with my audience today. Is there anything you're working on, like you'd like to share or promote? Like if people want to reach out and say hello, is LinkedIn the best place?
Yeah, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Um, that's always a good place. In terms of projects I'm working on, there's two community projects I'd like people to know of. So I co-lead the AWS Montreal user group. So that is a community program that is free where we're trying to foster the tech community and the AWS community in Montreal. So we do monthly events with free content, and there's pizza, and it's a cozy, nice environment. So if you are in Montreal, please join the AWS Montreal user group and come see us. The other thing I'm doing is I've joined Andrew Brown, who is running a free GenAI workshop for people, and I'm a guest lecturer for that 6 week boot camp. So if you want to learn GenAI for free, then join the boot camp, and I'll see you in February.
Awesome. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Thanks so much, Rola. And yeah, we'll talk later.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.